So here's the sleeve that we're going to be fitting into our armhole. So there's a few things that we have to determine before we start picking up the stitches. So let me just open up the sweater and show you where we're going to be fitting the top portion of this sleeve. Okay, so you can see right here, get rid of some of our strings, some of our loose threads. So here's our shoulder seam that we just completed. And we want to put the top of our sleeve along this section here. So it's going to fit in right here. And we're going to sew it along this edge, right into these corners here. Now you notice here there is a bound off edge here. That's the underarm. So stitches were bound off at the underarm. So when we fit our sleeve in, then those bound off edges need to also be sewn to this top few inches of the top of the sleeve as well. It's going to be the same on this side. So we need to take those into account as well when we're going to be picking up the stitches because we're going to do the same thing that we did with the shoulders. We have to pick up stitches on the sleeve and we have to pick up stitches along the area that the sleeve is going to be fitted into of the body of the sweater. And those stitches have to equal the same amount, because remember, when we're doing the 3 needle bind off, you have to have the same number of stitches on each needle. So the pattern is going to tell you how many stitches were bound off at the underarm. They're going to tell you how many stitches were bound off at the edge, at the top edge of your sleeve. And so those are the two numbers that we need to keep in mind for picking up. So my pattern and the size that I'm doing is telling me that I'm going to bind off 82 stitches along the top of the sleeve. But also, and I'm going to pick up, so I'm going to also have the same in this opening here where the top of the sleeve is going to fit. I'm also going to be picking up 82 stitches. The bound off edge is 15. I bound off 15 stitches on each of these underarms. So I also have to add that into the number of stitches that I'm going to be picking up. So I'm going to be picking up 15 stitches along the top few inches of the top of the sleeve. And that's easy to do because what I did was I did a salvage edge. So what that means is I added stitches, an extra stitch that isn't part of the stitch count of the pattern, just for seaming. And I did those edge stitches in stocking knit stitch. So I knit on the right side and purled on the wrong side, so that I have this row of knit stitches along the edge. And those are the stitches that I'm going to be picking up. So you can see each of those. It's a bit messy, but I can see those V's on the edge. So I'm going to be picking up 15 of those V's to correspond with the 15 bound off stitches that are on my underarm of the sweater. So I'm going to start with that. I'm going to pick up the 15 stitches here, and what I can do is I can just count down to where it's 15 stitches. I'm going to start, pick up those stitches, And then I'm going to continue along here and pick up 82 stitches. And again, that's easy to see because my pattern tells me that I bound off 82 stitches. So I just have to pick up each of these bound off stitches and it should equal 82. And again, those are pretty easy to identify because again, I can see these V's. That's what I'm going to be picking up. And then I'm going to continue along and pick up when I get to the end. I'm going to go down the side a few inches and pick up and knit 15 stitches to correspond with the 15 cast off stitches that I'm going to be, that was bound off for the underarm. So what I've done is I've just I've looked along the edge of the side of the sleeve. Then I'm going to be picking up the stitches that are going to then match the underarm cast off stitches. So remember, we need 15 stitches. So I've just looked at my salvage edge here. A salvage edge is just some extra stitches or an extra stitch that is added just on the edges, and these are done so that to make seaming easier. And I've just counted these V's here that I can see. They look a bit messy, but I can tell what they are, and I've counted 15. And just place my needle here just so I know where to start. So just like we did with the shoulders, we're going to pick up that stitch and knit it. And we're just going to continue along the top edge of this sleeve, picking up and knitting 15 stitches. Here's the 15 stitches that I've picked up along just the top portion, or just the side here, so that when I pick up the stitches on the underarm are going to match the underarm stitches. So now we're going to pick up 82 stitches across the top of the sleeve because that's what the pattern says that we bound off. We've done 15 stitches along the side, the top few inches. We've picked up 15 stitches along the side. We've completed 82 stitches, picked up and knit 82 of the bound off stitches along the top of the sleeve. And now we have to do 15 stitches down this side of the sleeve as well, so that it corresponds with this underarm area here. All right, so there's our stitches picked up. I'm just going to cut the yarn. Leaving a long enough tail to weave in at the end. And we're just going to set this aside for now, because now we're going to do the same on the body, the area that we're going to fit that sleeve into. So again, we're going to pick up these 15 bound off stitches here. We're going to pick up 82 stitches along this armhole area, and then we're going to pick up another 15 stitches here along the underarm. So I now have the stitches picked up on the armhole portion of the sweater, as well as the top of the sleeve and the sides of the sleeve. I just wanted to point out or give a little tip, because I don't think there's any need for me to go through demonstrating how to now do the 3 needle bind off on these, because I've shown you how to do that already. It's exactly the same. But one little tip I wanted to bring out, more of a aesthetic tip, is when you're working with in your pattern, there might be, say, a for the example here, I have a cable running down the center of this sleeve. And this sleeve, when it's joined in the armhole of this sweater, I would like the line of this sleeve, because the sleeve is going to go right down the center of the arm. It would make sense that it would line up with the seam of the shoulder. So if you can see that, here's the center of the cable. So if you can imagine that running down the center of the arm from the side view, and then you've got the seam here, it would look more visually pleasing if those 2 elements were in line or centered. So to ensure that that happens, what I did was I counted how many stitches I ended up picking up before I reached the center of this cable. So right here, this here, I'm just eyeballing it, is about the center of this cable. So I didn't count from the 15 stitches at the side here that are going to be part of the underarm stitches. I just counted the accounted from where it started at the underarm bind off, counted how many stitches, and I came up with 40 roughly. So what I did was, when I was picking up the stitches for the armhole, I made sure that from the underarm, I counted from the underarm stitches all the way to the center. I made sure that the center of this seam also was 40 stitches. So that way I will be sure when I knit these together that the middle of this cable is going to be right directly in line or lined up with the seam, the shoulder seam of my sweater. So it's just going to look a lot more visually pleasing. So that's something you can keep in mind if you are, say, working with a pattern that might have, it might be a color work pattern, and you might want or it might be stripes that you want to line up, say, on a seam or like the side seam of a garment, so that when somebody's looking at it, you want to make sure that those patterns match up. So it's a good idea to, when you're picking up the stitches, to keep that in mind and make sure that you mirror it on the side that you're going to be, the other side that you're going to be seaming. Just make sure that those patterns will line up so that it just looks more visually pleasing, and it'll just give a more polished and professional look to your finished garment when things line up properly. So it just takes a little bit of planning ahead to make sure that you can achieve that. So that's just the tip I wanted to give. What I'm going to do is I'm going to do the 3 needle bind off. So I've got my 3rd needle ready. I'm going to follow the same steps that I did before in the when I showed you how to seam the shoulders. I've just got my both of my pieces ready, and I'm making sure that the right side of the work is facing me. And that the right side of the other half as well is on the outside. So the wrong sides are together. And I'm just going to start knitting those pieces together as I did before. And I'm going to quickly bind off all of these stitches. And then when I come back, you'll be able to see how this looks. And then we can move on to the side seams of the sweater as well. And I'll show you what I do to make sure that the side seams are done properly. So you can see now that the shoulder seam, or the shoulder seam, and the top of the sleeve has been joined to the body. And remember, I was talking about how I wanted the shoulder seam to line up with the center of that cable. So I think it turned out pretty good. It's pretty close. So I'm pleased with how that looks. So now on to the side seam and under the sleeve. That's all that's left. And as you can see here, I've already completed the side seam. So you can see that there, running down the center here. So I did it the same way that I've done the rest of this sweater. So I'm going to use the sleeve to demonstrate quickly, again, how I did that. So along the side, we're not picking up bound off stitches, we're picking up the selvage edge stitches. So it's the same with under the sleeve arm. And I chose to pick up just a portion. So when I did the side, I only picked up to the underarm because I find it easier to work with a smaller chunk at a time instead of picking up the side up to the underarm and then picking up all the stitches for the sleeve as well. You can do that if you like, but I prefer to just do a section at a time. So I'll just do the side and then I do the sleeve seaming separately. I just think it makes it easier. Okay, so this is what the underarm looks like here. And I made sure I used the same technique to make sure that those the underarm seam lined up. I used the same technique that I talked about in making sure that the seam of the shoulder and the cable was kind of center. So you can review that again. And as you can see, I've already picked up some of the stitches, or I picked up the stitches of one half of the sleeve. And so now I have to do the other half. So when I picked these stitches up, I started at the I started from the underarm and worked my way this way, because remember, we have to pick the stitches up from the right side of the work. So the right side has to be, or the public side has to be facing us. So in order to pick up those stitches, I had to start at the underarm and work this way. So now when I'm doing the other side of the sleeve, I of course can't pick up the stitches going this way. I have to pick them up going this way. So the right side of the work is facing me. So I'm going to be starting here at the cuff and working towards the underarm. And we're going to pick up these stitches the same way that we have all along. We're just going to be picking up the Salvage Edge stitches. And remember, those look like V's. So if you look along the edge here, you can see the stitches look like V's. So that's what we're going to be inserting our needle into and picking those up. All right, so that's what I have picked up so far. I'm going to continue right to the underarm section, and I'm going to make sure the number of stitches that I've picked up is exactly the same number as the number of stitches that I've picked up on this side. And then I'm going to bind them off as we have for the other pieces of this sweater, and I'll come back to you when that's all done. And so there we have it. The sides have all been seamed. You can see that. I've seamed right up underneath, right up to the armhole and the underside of the sleeve. So you can really see how beautiful this seaming detail is. I'm really pleased how it turned out. Now it is a little bit of extra work to do because you have to pick up stitches along the sides of both pieces, and then you have to cast them off with the third needle, but I really do think that it is worth the effort when you want to add just a little bit of special or extra detail and texture to a design just to make it stand out. Another thing that would look really amazing is if this seam was done in a contrasting color. That would really bring something exciting to a project. I can imagine this like in a really deep orange or a dark brown would look really nice, or even like a dark gray contrast would have looked really nice with this as well. So I think I will do that in another project because I just love how this detail looks. I love seeing seams. I think they really show the architecture of the garment, and what better way to show how a garment is constructed than to let the seams be part of the design detail. So I hope that this technique is something that you try out. You can incorporate it in any pattern that you have that you feel that it would enhance. And now all I need to do is to block this sweater and enjoy it. So thanks for watching, and that's how you do 3-needle bind off. And until next time when I show you another knitting technique.